So I'm Holly Fortier, and I'm from Fort McKay First Nation, and I'm just thrilled to join you here today to talk about how Indian status affected us women. So it started way back in 1876 with the creation of the Canadian Indian Act. And the Indian Act was a piece of legislation that said Indians, which are First Nation people, and lands reserved for Indians, so Indian reserves, are now a federal responsibility. It's sad but true, but it was based on a racist ideology. We're just going to separate the Indians from all of Canada. We're actually the only ethnicity with a government department. And so there's all of Canada, and then there's First Nations. So what they started to do is register Indians and give us numbers to separate us and so what happened was they gave us an Indian status. I'm a status Indian. I'm registered through Fort McKay First Nation. Don't mind my pandemic manicure. And it's actually housed in Ottawa. We're the only ethnicity that has a government department. And so we were registered, and so that separated us. And also it was a way of controlling Indians. But what happened was they had a perception that we're just going to take care of the Indians till they don't need to be Indian anymore. So if you went to university, if you fought with the military, if you got another rule under here was that you couldn't buy or sell. So if you got a job, if you were into agriculture or business, and also if you were an Indian woman and you married a non-Indian man, all those things, you lost your status. And so losing the status was more than losing a number. It was displacement. It was being cut off from your culture and your community. And so they actually called it enfranchisement because they thought it was, a progression for us. But it wasn't, because it was caused a lot of, division, color shaming, and a lot of divisiveness and confusion for our people. But it was really the thing about being cut off from our culture and community. But what happened in 1985 with Bill C-31, they said if you had lost your status for any one of those reasons, you could get reinstated, but only by one generation. And so after that, there was different, the MacGyver case, the gender equity case. A decision was made 2 years ago. If you're born before 1984, you could get reinstated. But there is now categories of status. And so, when we think of, being First Nation, you could be any category of status or non-status, but we still want to be recognized as the first in the nation, and still today a nation within a nation. But the government has caused all these categories for us. And what it did, it was a very misogynistic, sexist approach to women, because our women were, really separated from our communities. And when you think of it too, under the Canadian Indian Act, if you're an Indian man and you marry a non-Indian woman, she's now a registered Indian. So the result of that is there's 26,000 women in Canada who do not have a drop of Indigenous blood that are registered Indians. Meanwhile, our women are trying really hard to regain their status. And so, when we think of way back prior to the Indian Act, traditional teaching was that Indigenous women were, and still today, are sacred beings. We carry life. Our ceremonies are based on women. When you think of everything, we believe in the connection, the circular teachings of everything from the drum to the medicine wheels, to all of our holistic teachings. It's all matriarchal. Women were often the final say, the leaders. And so there was that teaching for us. As a matter of fact, when Europeans came over, so the fur traders, missionaries, explorers, RCMP, they couldn't live in one of the harshest countries in the world without assistance. So they built a strong relationship with the First Nation people, especially the women, because the women provided food and clothing and helped them survive. Because we were like, you know what, friend, you're going to die if you're going to wear those shoes and that clothing here in these harsh climates. If you get sick, here's the medicine and here's your food sources. And so our women were valued, and that was the original relationship between First Nation people and the nations coming over, was meaningful and respectful. So I think of, today, and I think of, the whole issue with the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and how our women have been, so mistreated. And that's not even the word. It's just so sad, and I would invite you to look at the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Inquiry. There's 231 calls for justice, but for us, I want to go back to that traditional teaching where women are valued as sacred beings. And let's really teach our young boys, our young women, the value of who we are. Now, my new favorite book is called Indigenous Rights. I love this book. It's by this incredible Métis woman. She's a scholar. Sarah, you've read it. I love that her last name is Vowell and she's a writer. But anyways, at the end of every chapter, she has footnotes. You can be in this forever. And she has a really good explanation to status. And I love that. And if you haven't studied the Indian Act, please do yourself a favor, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, to read 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph. And, this is a really great, it's a really invaluable resource on how this impacted Indigenous people in Canada. And this is a follow-up to it. And so this talks about Indigenous relations, and it's just the follow-up. This is like the past, this is about moving forward. So I do highly recommend those two books to have a deeper understanding on that. But I just really want us to really tattoo it in our souls that moving forward, we need to have the approach of Indigenous women being sacred beings. And let's take a look at that and have that attitude for us moving forward. Thanks for this time with you. I just really appreciate it.